Hi, and welcome back to Candidate Conversations with the National Board. I'm your host, Danielle Brown, and I am so excited to hear from such a dynamic educator today. We do a little pre prep meeting, and I got to listen in. And can I just say that our guest today has so many experiences, has such a passion for the profession, and I can't wait to dive in. So, without further ado, Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's start with an introduction, how you came to teaching, what are you currently teaching? Take it away.
Excellent. Yes, this is such a cool opportunity. I am teaching honors English ninth grade, IB language and literature, and then a combined section of IB theater with high school theater students. And I've been able to keep that schedule for a couple of years now. So I'm at a point in my career where not only do I really enjoy what I'm doing, but I've been able to be blessed with the consistency to fine tune those skills and really get to know the curriculum and do different things with it. So I felt like I was kind of ready in point in my career for a challenge. So here we are.
I'm so excited about that. We're going to dive deeper into some of those topics that you talked about as far as like what you teach, because I think the theater strand is so interesting and like how you got there, but that's because I have insider information. So with that, I'm so curious, like how did you come to teaching? Like were you always going to be a teacher? Is it something that you were like at the age of 5, I knew I wanted to be in the service of students?
It was kind of like that. There was a defining moment, you could say, in my life. In high school, I was always involved with different things in the community and church and opportunities to babysit and just be around younger children. And I really enjoyed it. And I kind of had a natural knack for it. So in high school, there was an internship program in the child development program that allowed me to explore that on a more professional level. So I took some of the classes that were offered at my high school. And then by senior year, I was able to have a half day schedule and travel to the elementary school that I went to for third, fourth, and fifth grade and did an internship in a third grade classroom and work alongside of a teacher. And so when I went into college, I was still not quite sure. I had a lot of science, like I enjoyed anatomy and physiology, and again the people centered profession of nursing was my was my other passion, I guess you could say. And so I declared a nursing major, and my first week of college I went to one set of all of my classes over the course of 3 days, and I was like, no, I definitely am, and not, this is not where I need to be. I just felt like the teaching was where I needed to be. So I went and changed my major, and the rest is history. And it was actually elementary education. So yeah, my original certification is first through eighth grade, every subject. And coming to high school was an unforeseen part of that journey. I don't know. Do you want to get into that now, or should I
I
wait?
always want to get into that because as a like through and through, I am an elementary teacher. I thought I was going to go in and teach like middle grades, but most of my career was in K2, specifically in kindergarten. And when people say like, "Oh, yeah, I'm a high school teacher or a middle school teacher," I'm always so curious, like, how did you know that was the fit for you? And then I have another level of when someone says, I was an elementary teacher and I chose, whether like actually chosen or circumstances put me in high school. I'm like, wait, what? Because I couldn't, yeah, elementary through and through. So I'm so curious. How did you make that decision? What brought you to high school and similarities or differences, maybe?
Yeah, I actually have theater to thank for that. So your previous inquiry loops in perfectly. So elementary education, just because that's the age of the student that I had the most experience with, and I just pictured myself as an elementary school teacher. So I started my career in fourth grade and then did a little fifth and sixth grade because the sixth grade was in the elementary school. But then shortly into my career, I've always been in the performing arts. I minored in music. I did theater all growing up, and I realized I had hit my professional, part of my life, and something was missing. I really did
Mm,
feel that the arts and theater in particular was something that I needed to incorporate in my life. So I asked myself, is this something that I'm going to do on the side for fun, or what is this going to look like? So I started getting involved with the little drama club at the elementary school, and then some community theater programs. And then I did kind of a pre-professional program, a dinner theater at a local college, and a lot of the people in it were high school and college kids who wanted to be professional actors, directors, dancers.
Mm.
And here I am, this elementary school teacher, acting and singing and dancing alongside of them. And the music director of the production that I did was working at the school that I ended up getting my master's in. And it was such a unique program. There were only three like it in the country. It's a Master of Arts in Theater Education. And
Wow.
yeah, it was just two worlds colliding, the best of both worlds, all of the things. I was teaching elementary school and realized that there were two kind of paths for people in this program. People like me still teaching elementary school, but using arts integration as a technique in their own teaching and bringing the arts into it and exposing students that way, but also teaching theater as a curriculum and being a theater teacher. So that's the avenue that I took. And in my current school district, teaching theater, it's not really an elementary school level thing. You're either in a high school, or some local districts have middle school theater teachers. But I ended up going to high school to be a theater teacher. And then the pandemic happened. I was doing all kinds of things with theater and the performing arts, and I realized that I missed being in the classroom after freelancing. And I wanted to be in a place where I could get back to my roots, but also be able to layer in the passion that I had for theater and the arts. And I loved the reading and the writing of being an elementary school teacher. So it was a weird shift to be like, I feel like high school English is another layer to all of this. And I've just fallen in love with it and got my certification in the area when I started teaching again. And now being able to teach IB theater as one of the classes has been an absolute joy and a pleasure. So that's how all of that came to be.
I love how it's so connected and almost seamless. And the whole time I just had the biggest smile on my face because I actually started my teaching career as an arts integration specialist at a K-2 school and did not have like necessarily the training to do that. It was like a grant program, it was a way to get into the district. And they looked at my resume and they said, "Oh, you play clarinet? You can do arts integration." So anytime I hear people like using the arts in their work, it just looks so exciting to me because that was my foundation. I worked with teachers in the K-2 grade band. We would figure out how to infuse arts in the content that they were teaching. And so the fact that you get to do this as your job is so cool. That is so cool. And I love how the transition was one that sounds like it was like full of joy. Like you got to do the thing that brought you joy as well as like continuing to teach students and engage them in a different way. So very cool. Thank you for taking us down that journey with you. And so, of course, this podcast is all about having conversations with candidates, right? So we want to know more about you. And we're also really interested in about how the journey, as we so lovingly call it, is impacting you. So before we go there, I'm so curious. What has your journey been in board certification? Like, what have you submitted? Where did you start? What did you think of when someone was like, "Hey, have you heard of this national board certification? You want in?" Like all the things. So feel free.
Yeah, I actually, it crossed my path way back when I was still teaching elementary school in the first couple of years. I remember the iteration of the board certification that included packing physical papers in the box.
Yes. Yes.
And the I just remember teachers talking about the paper clipping of things and having the paper clip on the right side and not the left side and all of that. And let me tell you, that very detailed minutia of the submission has translated into the electronic. It's still a crazy process. They've just made it like Arial 11-point font, double spaced, and you can't do this and that and the other. So yeah, it crossed my path watching people go through it. And honestly, at that time, it just seemed like something that didn't need to happen necessarily in my life. I saw myself getting the master's degree and wanting to do that. And of course, there's incentives in my district for, lane changes and getting different, like a master's plus 30, master's plus 60. But the national board wasn't necessarily in that trajectory for me. And then, now, like I said earlier, I've come to a point in my career where it's not necessarily like complacent or comfortable, because as teachers we never get to
Mm,
that point. Even if you teach the same thing, you have different students and there's always different variables. But
yes.
I felt like I was ready for a challenge, so to speak, and I already had my master's plus 30 and just taking classes. It just didn't seem like something worthwhile, I guess. So there were a couple teachers at my school who have recently gone through it and suggested it. And then, of course, there was the curriculum specialist that put me in touch with you guys, who also said that it was something that she could see me doing and completing and excelling at. So I went ahead and dove in with both feet. And I know that there are people who do it in 1 year, and that just seemed absolutely crazy to me. I'm also a single mom of two beautiful boys, and I live about 45 minutes, 55 minutes away from the school that I teach at.
Oh, wow.
So there was also balance to be struck. So I decided to just do it, two components in 1 year and two components in the second year, but I didn't really know much about them. So I said it just seemed logical to me to do 1, 2, and then 3, 4. And then the more I learned about it, and I realized that people were doing like 2 and 3, or 2 and 4, and then 1 and 3 and 1 and 4, because 1 is just the test and 3 and 4 big lifts. So I realized that I'm leaving year 2 as a lot of work, but I could do it. I could take 3 years. I could do component 3 next year and then component
Yeah.
4. But I have to say, my state and my district offer a pretty great incentive, a monetary incentive. So, as much as I hate to admit, it wasn't just professional growth and personal achievement. It was also, did I mention that I'm a single mom of two beautiful boys? That the salary incentive was also great. So since you don't know your scores until December and you're submitting in May, and then you have to pass, and then the county, your district won't recognize that until the following year. If I take
Mm,
3 years, then I'm not looking at a salary increase until 5 years out. And I wanted to do it as quickly as possible, but often also not bite off more than I could chew. So
yeah.
there's that. So now that I'm here, I sat for the test. I feel good about it. I am getting ready to submit all of the pieces for component 2 in the next week or so. And the good thing is, my district offers support classes. So
Nice.
starting in February, I got to meet with a group of educators with someone who's certified to coach and train people and guide people through this process. I would recommend that to anyone if it's offered at your level, to have kind of a formal process for guiding you through it. Because, like I said about the paperclip joke, there really is a whole element to this where it is just putting a puzzle together of what they expect. It's not necessarily difficult work.
Mm,
Part of the heavy lifting was going through all of the material and making sure that you have the component guidelines and what's actually expected, cross-referenced with the standards that it matches, cross-referenced with the level 4 rubric, cross-referenced with the 5 core propositions. So
yes.
I think I said this in the podcast interview, I like to use the analogy of like good old screen printing on a t-shirt, that like the core propositions are the first layer, and then you take the next color and that's the standards, and then you take the next color and that's the level 4 rubric, and by the end you have this beautiful picture, but you have to carefully layer the things to make sure you don't miss anything. And I couldn't imagine trying to do two of those at the same time. So it's a lot.
I could not have said that any better than what you did. So thank you. I think the messaging around the work that goes into the process, and then also too, just that mindset of it's the work that you're doing, right? And now it's just the point of like spending the time to articulate. And as you said, like screen printing those t-shirts. When I heard that in the pre-interview, I was like, that's exactly what it is. It's like adding those really clear and defined colors, but you can't do it all at once, right? It's like, because if not, if you never screen printed, it turns out a mess when you like throw on all the colors and you're like, here we go. So I'm so glad that that came up in the conversation. And I also want to not only give you kudos, but to reiterate for listeners that if you have the flexibility and choice about how you choose your components, feel free to take that, because there are considerations that as an organization we don't have to have the foresight on, right? You know your busy seasons. You know that you're a single mom to two kiddos who probably have extracurriculars. And so while four taking on all four at one time could seem like an ideal, that doesn't fit your life. And that's okay. You planned in a way that fits your life. And I think sometimes people forget that that's part of like also the onus of this work, right? Maybe you're doing one and two, or you're doing two and three, or one and four, or just one. Maybe you just want to like sit for the test and say, this is or this isn't for me. So I really appreciate you like taking that time to break down like what decisions you went through to decide what you would do, but also you reflected on like what if you were to do it again, would you leave three and four until next year? And it doesn't sound like you would, but that's okay. I think you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And so with that, it seems like you had one, not only like champions and kind of cheerleaders saying, I can see you going through this process, but I'm also so curious what either intrinsic motivations you had, because yes, incentives are great, right? And I think it's okay to name like, yeah, financial incentives really helps like me want to get this done. But what about it? What about your own teaching practice has been affirmed through this process? Have you been challenged in any ways that you had to like sit back and be like, oh, wow, and then like move forward? So I'm so curious in the process, anything affirming, challenging, and if challenging, like how did you get through? Not necessarily over, but through.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of both actually. And true to my experience thus far, where everything has happened in such a beautiful, I guess you use the word seamless. The timing just has been working out. I'm also in
Mhm.
my evaluation year in my district. And when I had my big unannounced observation from my vice principal, she actually spoke to my use of differentiation
Mm,
and meeting students' needs. And in our post observation discussion, I said, well, interesting thing that you highlighted that in my teaching practice, because that's the component that I'm working on currently,
yeah.
is all about differentiation. So yes, outside incentives and encouragement, all set aside, intrinsically I know that whether I'm teaching an inclusion class with specific needs in 504s and IEPs, or it's just a class of students with varying levels of engagement and background and content knowledge, you're going to have to differentiate no matter what. It's
Yeah.
always going to be a constant in what you have to bring to the table. So there was nothing better than attacking this component in particular first, because I felt like it was the one that really had you diving into that analytical element, and then also the reflective piece, starting with the teaching application and writing about your own teaching, whereas
Hmm.
the other components have to do with data and then recording. And I feel, even though they're heavy lifting, it just made sense to do this one first in the order of things. And then having it be an evaluation year gave me an opportunity to use what I'm writing and analyzing in my component two materials. I was able to use that as a talking point with the assistant principal in my post observation meeting. So it worked out pretty swimmingly.
That, I mean, okay. I promise listeners, Michelle is not a plant, because it does sound like you are, but Michelle is not a plant. But like those are the types of experiences that we and ahas that we're hoping that educators are having. Like one, this is not one more thing; it's the thing. It's what you do, right? And sometimes we're not always asked to articulate why we're making decisions or who our students are, but this is just a process that encourage you to take that pause is what I've always told candidates. It's a moment of pause for me to be like, okay, these students at this time need this thing from me. And do I have the thing to give? If not, how do I need to learn it? Who do I need to lean on? And so again, Michelle may sound like a plant, but she's not. Like, this is real life. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words because I really want people to feel and understand that yes, there's, writing, and yes, there's portfolio requirements, and this is the thing that we do. We teach, we reflect, we try to get better so we impact the students that we have in front of us at the time that we have them. So
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I was going to say about a challenge as well. Component two has you select two students and really it makes you think about how you build rapport, how you
mm,
get to know them individually, which is such a big part. And you said it really well, and I want to speak more to that this is not an extra thing. And once you reconcile that with yourself, because as teachers we always put so much on our plates, and different initiatives from the school or just things always come down the pike that add and add and add and add. And once I really looked at this as just thinking about what I was doing already and not as something extra, it became a
mhm.
lot easier to tackle. And so my biggest suggestion, something that I learned pretty early on in the process, which was very helpful, and I have to thank the prep class that I was in for this guidance as well. Just from the jump, don't even get into the weeds of what's the requirement in the writing and
Mm,
all of that. Just start documenting. I had just a Google Doc open where if I gave sentence frames to this one student, or if I had a one-on-one conversation, I just started quickly documenting, quick and dirty. What was I naturally doing? What were some of the conversations that I was having? Am I offering word banks? Am I providing preferential seats for these students? And that's the thing about educators, is especially when we're decades into our career like I am and have had so many rich experiences, it's all ingrained and just
yes.
it's automatic. So
Yes.
sometimes I read an article about universal design that our coach gave us in that class, and I was like, whoa, I'm doing all of these things, but you don't necessarily have, like, you have to have this out of body experience and look at it from the outside in to say, oh wow, I have lots I can write about, and you don't realize it because we do it all the time. So that's a huge thing, is that you're already doing the work. Just sit down and take note of it.
I really love that very tangible tip of like just before anything, just like document things that you're doing, your own noticings and wonderings. Because I think that is such a great entry point for people to one, make the connection of this is something that I do. Now I'm just taking the pause to dive deeper. I will say the biggest, like many years of coaching and being coached, one of the things that when I went through the process, I had a coach say to me, I was talking about something I did in my classroom, and the coach, and I said, oh, just in passing, I was like, well, all kindergarten teachers do that. And then the way that she like paused and looked me in my eyes, and I play this back every time, she said, no, Danielle, that's what you do as a kindergarten teacher. And I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. Like, do I put, like, can I own that I'm doing things? And she's like, yes, this is a process. Oftentimes we take ourselves out of it, but like you've made decisions because you know your students and because of things that you're passionate about or that you've learned about, right? And so I always take that energy when I coach others too. It's very easy to be like, well, all insert grade level teachers do that. But the honest fact is, like, that's not necessarily true, right? You do it and you do it with purpose, even if sometimes we're just doing it in like a space of automaticity, like you said. So fantastic tip. I can't, yeah, I love that. So we know that you have already sat for component one and you're submitting component two. Have you made a plan for what submission looks like for you? Is there going to be a little celebration? What are some things you're considering, as not to put any pressure, but the deadline is creeping? Like, what are you
Yeah.
what are you sitting with or considering right now?
So I have all of the forms done. I have the contextual sheet and then the 4 samples for student A, and then 4 samples for student B. So it was also a suggestion to just start uploading stuff, because the closer you get to the submission deadline,
Yes.
the busier the website, the server gets. And if you get things uploaded, you don't have to press submit, but they're there and they're in it. So I'm sitting on them right now because I just want another set of eyes to look at them,
Yeah.
and I just want to make sure that I'm ready. But also you can exit out and resubmit. So I think within the next couple of days I will be submitting those forms. And then as far as the middle part, the commentary part, I have to finish looking at their writing pieces, because one of the sample 2 that I used was actually due last week. So I wanted to use something that really showed the growth over time.
Yeah.
So the students as readers and interpreters of text is more established in my written commentary. I'm finishing up analyzing their work and speaking to the fourth and the fifth elements about how did they do, how did I use their feedback from the first piece to help them get to the second piece, their growths, their challenges, and all that, which I know it's all there in my brain. I just have to sit down and get it done. And then of course there's the reflective piece, which is about a page, 2 pages, but I think mine's going to have to be a page, because my part 1, the context where you flesh things out,
Yeah.
they suggest about a page. Mine is a solid 2 pages with a line on the third, but there's nothing in it that I can cut,
Yeah.
because it just speaks to standard 1 so well about getting to know my students, and they're just so unique. And a lot of that is important to know as I lead the people who are going to read my work through them as readers and interpreters of text and as writers. So my reflection doesn't have to be too long. So that's also a good thing. I can just quickly do that. And then hopefully I'll be able to submit early next week, well before the deadline of, what is it, May 17th, May
May
16th?
17th.
Yeah,
Yep.
May 17th. There was no way that I was ever going to wait until that day. Absolutely not, because I know that the internet fails people all the time, and you never wait to the last minute. So I was hoping to do it all with a week to spare. That's my plan.
I love
Oh,
that.
and then celebrating, that didn't even occur to me until you mentioned that in the email when I got to preview the questions for this podcast, that I saw myself celebrating when I actually get it. Notice how I said when and not if.
I love it.
Speak it into existence. So I definitely will do something very special when that happens. But I don't know. I'd have to wait till December to see if I pass. I don't think I can celebrate just submitting it. I think I'll wait and see. And if I pass, I mean, and it's not even about passing. That's the other thing, is really understanding how this all works. It's almost like the IB diploma. If
Yeah.
anyone knows about International Baccalaureate, the students don't just get individual passes. It's a cumulative score across the board. And that's what National Board is, that you have to get a minimum, of course, on each component. But then if you really excel at one and you kind of fell short in another, they can balance each other out. So
Yes.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to. I'll see you in December of 2026, right? Yeah, because
Yes.
2025, I find out about component 1 and 2. So December of 2026, I'll let you
All
know.
right. Okay, we'll circle back in December 2026 and say, hey, how did you celebrate? Um,
I,
so we now know that you are submitting 3 and 4 next year, components 3 and 4. I'm curious, are there any like ways that you prepare to plan going into the next school year? They are different, obviously, components in 1 and 2, and offer different ways of engaging, like your video recording and really being in community with other teachers, leaders, and learners. So I'm curious, how do you plan to set yourself up for success, so that lift doesn't maybe feel quite as heavy as you go into the new school year?
Well, my district also offers a summer intensive. I forget what they call it exactly, but they do like a week long boot camp for all of the
Oh,
components. I know. And I don't know when that's going to be yet, but hopefully I'm available. And since it covers all of it, I asked some of the people in the county, well, if I sign up for this week long thing, I don't need to come to components 1 and 2. And they were like,
yeah,
yeah, you just show up for what you need.
yeah.
So I'm going to hopefully dip my toe into the pond this summer. I will hopefully be able to sign up for another support class through my county, through the district, and of course, lean on other colleagues. There were people who were in my support class that another English teacher at a school, we actually know some of the same teachers. We've
Okay.
been proofreading each other's work and bouncing
Love
ideas. So
it.
that's another huge thing. If you can find someone, even if it's through like, I don't know, like a national board forum or someone even across the country from you. If you can just find someone who's going through the journey with you as just an emotional support person, someone just to proofread and to ask each other questions. But she's doing all 4 components this year. So next year, I know, even though she can't talk since she will have submitted it, she can't talk about it
Yeah.
exactly, but she can certainly, shed light on what worked for her as far as process and tips and stuff. So I'm gonna lean on her a little bit. And then I fully plan on starting work in the fall. This year, the support class that I took didn't start till February. So
Uh-huh.
the fall was kind of, I didn't do anything in the fall. I just started. I know. So I know now that I can kind of hit the ground running, and I'll be
Yeah.
more comfortable to start prepping for things earlier. Um, and with the video recording piece, there's a lot more moving pieces. So I know what to expect a little bit more.
That so people can't see our faces, but you reacted to my face, and the fact that you just stated or shared that like you really kind of just started in February. Kudos to you for a multitude of reasons. One, not only for like understanding and embodying like what the work is, but the way you speak about the process. I would have assumed that you started sometime last year, maybe even in the summer, and so my face was more of like a I'm because I'm just so impressed. That is amazing. And also the fact that you now know that, I can hit the ground running in September, October, whatever. I think that's going to give you some space too to kind of like figure out how to engage in component 3 and 4. So way to go. Kudos to you. That's all I have. And so, Michelle, I knew this conversation was going to be so good because as I was listening, I was like, oh, yeah, like she gets it. Like there are so many things that I want to unpack and like chat through. But as we close, I'm so curious. You've already dropped so many good nuggets and pieces of advice. Is there something that you have left unsaid, either as a piece of advice and or what would past Michelle want to know that current Michelle currently knows about the process? If there's anything that you want to leave listeners with as a reminder, because you've been hitting it out of the park left and right with all the like, try this and like, don't forget about that. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Danielle. That's very kind of you. I it actually started out with the class that I'm in, the support class.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone in any discipline, and there's quite a few based on discipline, but also age level. You could be in different places. People were hungry to be with content specific and like minded groups, and our coach was actually saying it's quite honestly better to have someone outside your content area, because it's
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing where if you speak the language, it's like whenever you read those memes where the vowels are taken out of words and you can still read it. It's like if I just have English people reading my English stuff, if I've missed something or if I've been vague on something, they naturally fill in the pieces, and it won't ding. They won't ding it. So I actually had a math teacher at my school recently help me out because she's getting ready to take some classes to become a coach, and She'll probably have to re-up her board certification in the next couple of years too. So it's kind of a quid pro quo, because she's gotten experience supporting me for her next steps in her journey. But then having the math person with a completely different discipline in her brain, if I say something that's very English specific, I can't think of an example right now, but or just book clubs or literature circles.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I don't want to go off on a tangent and waste valuable page space going into too much detail, but there has to be a parenthetical perhaps that says, small groups of students reading the same book over 4 weeks. And so that's a huge tip
Mm-hmm.
of having someone outside, even having someone outside education, having a family member look at it. And also, she suggested that we, the English people, tend to be more verbose, and that can actually work against us because of the page limits. And you don't, there's definitely a balance to be struck when you come from that kind of background, even if you're a social studies teacher sometimes, or elementary. You want to make sure that your writing is detailed enough and clear, but you're not wasting space where you need to be talking about something more important that's for a score, like data or something like that. And we kind of touched on it earlier, but I want to reiterate that the biggest part of it is spending time with what they want. And this was the best thing. And it was actually this math teacher who told me, I have the standards, the 5 core propositions, and the rubric language all highlighted. And I made a chart where I cross referenced all of them. So on one column, it was the level 4 rubric vernacular. And the other column was the commentary questions. And in the other column were the standards that it hits. And get all of your writing down, get everything in there, but then go back to those documents that they provide and use their own language. So, for example, if I'm talking about an opportunity where I gave a student feedback in the writing process that had them go back and revise their work. Well, if you look at component 4 or component 2, level 4 rubric, it says the teacher engages in detailed and effective communication with students that directs their attention to the salient features of their work and encourages them to reflect upon how their work can be improved. So in that moment, I said, in peer review, the students are using my feedback on their drafts to bring their attention to areas of their work that encourages them to reflect and revise, and you just use their language. And there's, part of me, I was like, oh, that's cheating, or that's a cheap trick. And everyone that I've talked to has been like, no, that's a good thing. You're doing what they want, and you're making sure that in their brain, while they're reviewing your work, they're like, oh, check, she checks that box, she checks that box. So there is nothing wrong. It's that age old test taking strategy that we tell our students, like, turn the prompt back around on itself when you're answering the question, spit it back out in a different way that shows that you're interpreting it, you understand it, and you're able to deliver what they're looking for. So yeah, that's it.
I am so glad you remembered that tip and piece of advice, because I would agree. It is such a strong one to hold on to. And it's not, like you said, it's like not cheating. It's not taking the cheap way out. What it's actually doing is ensuring clarity so that when the assessor is looking at it, they can see what you are doing. Because sometimes, like to your point, when you're in it all the time, or someone else who is in a similar field or teaching context is in it, we make our own meaning, right, as we read your papers or give feedback. But like, we can't assume the assessors will and or can, but use the language from the standards. It's also a good way for you to teach yourself to articulate different practices that you do, that so you're not in the boat of like, well, all kindergarten teachers do that. Well, no, I do this because I know this about my students, and this is how it impacts them, and the standards show me that that's reality. So no, that's a fantastic last piece of advice. I'm glad you remembered it and you didn't have to email us it. I am so excited for you. I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation, and I can't wait to check in December 2026, which seems wild to hear, but to learn about how you celebrate your word
Oh,
certification.
thank you so much. I look forward to that.
Thank you. Best of luck,
Thank you
Michelle.
so much.